Thank you for having me here. And this is the first conference I've spoken at post-COVID. So it's nice to be in front of like an actual audience and not be just speaking on Zoom at a camera for a change. So yeah, why developers need to care about testing more than ever before. When I found out I was speaking here, and it was a developer-focused conference, I wanted to do something that was kind of more focused to my audience. I'm used to speaking at testing conferences mostly. So let's see if this works. Yes. So who am I? I'm Syed Ali. I am a test engineer, software tester. That's what I go by. I've been doing this job for about 10 years. And like most software testers I know, I kind of just fell into this job. I wasn't ever intending of becoming a software tester. I did want to work in development growing up though. So I went to university to do computer science and I dropped out of computer science. And when I dropped out, I said to myself, I was never going to work in development and see what happened to life. But it's funny because after I dropped out of computer science, I was doing a sociology degree. And after becoming a tester, I saw the writings of people like James Back and Michael Bolton. And they were talking about how actually software testing is sociology. And it's the kind of point where computer science and sociology meet together. And I somehow fell into this role, which seems to be perfect for like the background and education I have. Let's go. So there's something that I think for a lot of people in this room is going to be good to understand and kind of help you understand the ideas I'm going to try and convey. The difference between testing and checking. Does anybody have any ideas of what the differences are?
Who gets it right gets a t-shirt.
Exactly. So when we check something, we get a yay or nay. So I'm sure many of you, even if you're not testers, will use some kind of testing tools, unit tests, API level tests, any of this kind of test code. And when we run this code, it gives us a yes or a no. We make an assertion and it either passes or it fails. This is a basic check. And code is very good at performing checks. But the thing that code can't do is test. Testing is everything around that happens, not the code itself running, but how did you decide what code to write? How did you decide what assertions to make? At what level? All of these kinds of things is where the actual testing is happen. And when the code runs, they're just checks. And the way I like to think of it is kind of, like an engineering console. There's lots of lights. And then maybe there's a big console in a factory and it's, one light is labeled conveyor belt 1, conveyor belt 2. And if a light goes off, the engineer then has to go and investigate this issue. And that's how I like to think about these kind of testing tools, is that they provide us this fast feedback of going, oh, there's a failure here. Then we go and investigate, and that's where the real testing is actually happening. So this is a pipeline created by a colleague of mine, Martin Lloyd-Wright. And it's funny, he joined Kinnan Carter, and within a few weeks of him joining, he said he wanted to come talk to the testing practice. And he wanted to talk about this. This is his ideal pipeline. And so, I'm sure it's going to be difficult for some people to see. But here we've got the build phase. So there's run developer tests, run service contract tests, build and publish artifact, run security checks, manual deployment to production, and then we've got some feature flags going from an alpha group, beta group, low risk user group, moderate risk, high risk user group. So this would be where we've got like 100% rollout. So can anybody tell me where in this process the testing is happening? Or where it should be happening? Who said everywhere? I like that answer. Any at the end? I don't like that answer. So really, all the real testing is happening before anything happens in the pipeline. It's got to be happening during development, because development's not done until testing's done. You can't. There's no point in trying to separate these things. it's a core part of development is to test and understand the things that we've created. Creating software is so different to like building other things because there are so many what ifs and maybes, and we can, I've written a bit of code here and there, and like others here, I'm sure you've written code, and sometimes it does something that you did not expect, and sometimes it does something that you don't understand, and sometimes you just have to go, okay, it's working, I'll just ignore that bit for now. I don't understand it, but cool. So this is a picture of what AI thinks a development team without a tester looks like. I think it's accurate, If you've got a development team without dedicated testers, then, you're going into Mordor. Like, you're not having a good time. But there are so many teams now that think you might not need a dedicated tester. Why do you need testers? We have an automated test suite that runs every time code is merged. We have these checks here. When it goes in the pipeline, we have these checks here. Why do I need a tester? But, just because you've written test code that checks things, do you know if it's good code? Is that your strength? Is that your kind of main thing? Or sometimes having somebody who's very skilled and dedicated their time to this pursuit and this particular part of engineering is very beneficial to have on the team. And for funsies, these are some other pictures of what AI think development team without a tester looks like. I think these are kind of amazing. I don't know what this is. Like, why is there an eye here? No idea. And if anybody's interested, they came from Stable Diffusion and Crayon. So often in my career, I've heard that anyone can test, that anybody can do my job. Like nearly every single time I've ever done a conference talk, somebody has to come up to me afterwards and go, yeah, that was a really good talk, but your job's not going to be here in 5 years' time, right? You know this, don't you? I'm like, they're still paying me, and people were telling me that 5 years ago, people were telling me that 10 years ago. They're still paying me to do this job, though. So what I think people mean when they say anyone can test is really anyone can check. Absolutely. You can ask the product owner on your team to log into the app and see if the user can add something to the basket and check out. It's a fairly straightforward user journey. You can ask anybody in the team to check that, sure, and that's all right, but can anybody test it? And when I say can anybody test it, I mean, are the people who are going to make that check also thinking about the things you're not thinking about, looking for issues, maybes, what ifs, actually thinking about the different types of users you have interacting with your software, thinking about accessibility issues, thinking about security issues, thinking about data issues that you may not have thought of. There's so many things that testers kind of have to think, because anybody can kind of think about, we have refinement meetings, we think about the unknowns there. And it's like, sure, we want to refine the known unknowns, but as testers, the difficult thing for us is everybody looks to us to find the unknown unknowns, and that's a bit of a challenge and something I don't think anybody can do. But with the right training, anybody can do anything, right? But I don't think it's what anybody can do without a proper background and education, training, etc. So something I've heard quite often in my career is how producing software is like a factory process, and that people in development teams should be able to substitute in for other people in the development teams. And we should have that well-rounded knowledge to be able to do that. But the more I've thought about it, I think making software is more kind of artisanal. I think it's more artisanal. If you think about like a table like this, and if you think there's a team of craftspeople making it, you could have one person who's really focused on joinery and they're just the expert in making those perfect, beautiful joins. You could have somebody who is also an expert on this scrolling and doing these beautiful designs. And sure, the person who makes the joins could probably do the scroll work and vice versa, but it doesn't mean they're the best at doing that thing. And there's a reason why people specialize, and there's a reason why people kind of have a focus and get drawn to certain parts of the industry. So what can you do? Lots of people here working in development teams, maybe working in development teams without testers, or maybe you're working with testers that aren't enabled very well or aren't respected within teams. What can you do? I'd say you can advocate for good testing. And I've got a story from a colleague of mine, one of the best testers I've ever worked with. When I started working with him, I was like, oh, I really need to improve. he was good. And he was that good that he kind of got too OP at testing. So he's currently working on a project as a back-end developer. And the last project we worked together on, he was a front-end developer. So he's going through all the different builds of engineering, trying to max out his levels on all of them. But he said, he was talking to me about the main differences he feels like since he switched. And he was telling me that once he became a developer, anytime he gave an estimate to the team or to a client, nobody ever questioned it. And throughout his career as a tester, he would say, oh, we probably need a few weeks to do this or something like that. Clients would always question. Other people in the team would always question. But suddenly, now he's a developer, nobody questions those estimates. And I think developers need to realize that there is a certain privilege being in a development team and being a developer, that people will trust you and just go off. You say 2 weeks, they go, oh, that must be a complicated thing, they need 2 weeks. And that's fair. But in these situations, you can use that privilege in the right way. So if somebody's questioning a tester, you can say, oh no, I'm sure it needs, if they think it needs that kind of time, it needs that kind of time. Let's trust them, right? And I'll give you a story of one of the best developers I've ever worked with, and this story was a shock for me. So I'd recently joined a business banking app project. We were just at stand-up, going through the board, and then after we've been through tickets, the Agile delivery lead wants to just give us an announcement that because we've got more work coming through the client and we've got some deadlines, that we might be getting some extra developer resource. Now, the lead iOS developer instantly said, well, if we're getting more developers, we better get more testers because there's no point in having one without the other. And I stood there and I was like, my heart was racing. I was in love with this developer. I had never heard a developer advocate in that way for testing. And I was like, oh, this is what it's like to work in a good team, with proper working practices, with people who understand the different roles and the need for them, and why we all have our different specialities, and to be able to trust those. So, I would say the most important thing, if you want to take anything away from this talk, if it's this is the too long didn't read slide. If you've ignored all the other ones, I'd say focus on this. Don't let no one separate the testing from the development. Clients need to understand that the development's not done until the testing's happened. I mean, they have to understand that it's not done until there's been PO sign-offs and there's been client demos, and that's really when things are getting done, right? So we have to have the whole team, have clients understand that we can't separate these things, and testing happens the best when it's integrated into the development process from the start. There's so many projects that I've been on, and they brought me in 2 months before release, and I said to them, I look at the software and I'm like, who let you do this? Who said this was okay? And they're like, oh, we made those decisions. Who coupled this functionality to this functionality? This is ridiculous. Oh, well, it just fit and we had to get it done. It's terrible. And at that point in time, unwrapping those mistakes, It's difficult. That's why if we're integrated early and testing is with the developers and we're working together, that's when we can make really great quality software. So we've got one of the things I think people think is the testing, and especially for clients, the testing is a box ticking exercise. They want tests to be the gatekeeper of quality and just say, oh no, we're done now. But that's not how it works. Where we really want that kind of gatekeeping to happen is with the client, because they're the ones that are actually the authority on whether the software we've created is fit for purpose. So we need to start thinking about how the development and the testing in the development is integrated throughout the course. So yeah, don't let non-engineers try and separate us. We're all part of development teams working together. So, thank you very much. Questions?
Where do we start?
Also, just before a question, on the last talk about open source, I love that, by the way. One of the questions was asked, like, how can junior developers get involved in open source? A really good thing is to find existing projects and just do the minor bug fixes. There's so many minor bug fixes that people will be grateful for, and they're great ways to get into a code base. Just a random aside there.
Thank you. Okay, so do you think a QA, before getting a QA, should go through the software development cycle in order to have a better understanding how to challenge a solution when they are doing the testing?
By going through the cycle, how do you mean in terms of like learning and understanding all parts of it?
Probably not the advanced development level, but at least doing some software development first in order to understand what can the developers leak during the build process, in order to have a better understanding after how to challenge a solution and not just checking it.
Yeah, I think like if you can write code as a tester, then yeah, absolutely it's going to help, because it means it gives you access not only to that understanding of how it feels to write code, but also it gives you access to using all these different testing tools out there, which if you don't know how to code to at least some degree, it kind of closes you off. Like me personally, I'm a terrible coder, but I can get things done, right? If I have a task and I need to do something, I can write code to do it. Will it be pretty? No. Will it get the job done? Fine. It's good enough, right? And that's all I need, and that's why I think, I mean, I know some testers who write beautiful code, and good for them. But yeah, I think it's very helpful. I think coding is just something that's helpful because it means you have access to all these tools that run using code. You know, think about one of the previous talks about using things like Kubernetes and all this and having infrastructure as code, because then if you're able to at least understand the code that's happening, you know. Personally, I read pretty much every PR on a project if I'm working on it, and I will make sure I've got access, because I don't want developers putting things into the code base without me knowing. Mm-hmm. And even if they don't add me to the PR, I just have an alert set up, so any PR gets raised, I get an email. Next question.
Okay, so as an experienced tester, what would you say that is the biggest challenge for testing softwares?
It's, yeah, knowing those unknown unknowns. How do you uncover the information? That's really key to the team. And sometimes, though, that information might not be up to you to like actually say. It might not be because, oh, I found this out and, oh, this could have been, oh, this issue. Sometimes that just might be asking the right questions. So, you know, if we're in something like a planning meeting or a refining meeting, you know, just asking something like, oh, have we thought about this? Or have we thought about when this happens in this situation, or this type of user is using it? Have we thought about that? And sometimes that's all you need to do to help start that conversation. And then when the whole team's thinking about these questions, and then we can kind of uncover these like unknown issues. But yeah, I think that's one of the biggest challenges. And the other biggest challenge is just having respect for your position. That's probably the biggest challenge I've had, is there's so many instances of where people just don't respect testers because they think all we're doing is checking. And sure, if there's somebody who's doing something that I know code could do very quickly, I might not take them that seriously, but you know, understanding the real role of a tester is like much bigger than just checking. Thanks.
A tester, it's considered in a refinement session, let's say. I mean, in a user story, how its estimation of a tester is considered dependent or independent from a developer testing estimation, let's say.
In general, I loathe giving estimations for tickets, and I think it's usually the wrong way to do things. If you're going to ask me, I am Kanban all the way over Scrum. Like, I think let's break things down into the smallest units that make sense, and then let's just do the work, and then let's start making our estimations based on the throughput of the work that's happened. So yeah, and the thing is, in my current role, all I get asked for is estimations, and I absolutely detest it because I think it's a pointless activity to do before, ahead of time, ahead of doing the work. It's like, oh, how long is this work going to take? And I'm sure there's lots of people sat in here that have been in planning meetings, and you get asked to estimate something, and you just say a number because you're like, in your head you're thinking, I don't actually know, but probably less than this. And if it's more than this, well, I'll update the team, right? So, yeah, that's my answer for estimations.
So, a quick one. For a given project, what is the proportion between development time and current time? And how does that proportion change for a huge app like a banking app, for example, and a small startup?
This is a difficult one to answer, because again, it's all about like, how do you make that estimations? What particular like testing time are we talking about? Like, what testing activities are we talking about? The testing activities like being in meetings, planning, refinements, Three Amigos. I don't know. This is why I don't want to separate development and testing, because then you can just give an overall figure for all the development to actually be done. Because I don't know. Like, it's one of those, it's like, I could say, oh, well, it's a 50% split, but then it goes to a big project and it's like 25-75.
Or if it's on pre-sales, for example, we want to win the client, and then we want to get a team and propose a team. So then we need to know how much actually test engineers we need to get to the team and how much developers.
Okay, so if you're using it in terms of working out how to have the team makeup, I think that's a different way of thinking about it. Like, ideally, if you could have a developer and a tester like paired together and just developing every story, that would be amazing, and that like can work really nicely. Usually we don't get that luxury, so I'd say as many testers as the client will pay for.
Yes, so so can you show us a little bit more of what is your secret sauce if you want to become a tester, but if you're a checker, and how like is it something that like you can earn it by experience, or you can teach someone to do that?
Yeah, absolutely both. Like, when I started testing, I was just testing from the start. And I think for a lot of people, even if the way they view their job is just checking, they probably are testing and don't even realize it. Just because actually just nobody like uses the same software exactly the same way, right? And so, you know, if you've got a machine checking something and like pressing a login button or something, the machine does that the same way every time, but the human does it slightly differently. So even if the human thinks they're just doing a basic check, they'll probably be doing things unconsciously that are actually testing, but the way to level that up is understanding that and then be able to like really harness it. yes, you can do it by training yourself, reading a whole host of amazing blog articles, watch talks, etc. You know, there's so many conversations on Twitter and LinkedIn about testing. You know, that's how I kind of got better, is just to like get as much like kind of different types of information. So whether that's blog articles, watching lectures, or you know, sometimes like just directly getting involved in these random Twitter conversations between testers, and like nobody knows who I am, but I'm just going to ask a question because that's how Twitter works, and you can, and just like get involved, I guess. But you know, there's some very good, I guess, easy ways to recommend. There's a course called Rapid Software Testing that's taught by James Back, Michael Bolton, and a few others. That is probably the best course you could do. And I will give a quick opinion that I don't recommend ISTQB foundation level for a tester. I have heard some of the advanced levels are good certifications, so I can't speak on those, but I would never recommend anybody to do the foundation level. There's much better, you could just spend your time reading blog articles and it would be much better for you, I think, as a tester. And just testing things and really getting involved and thinking about what you're doing. I think that's the biggest thing, is realizing that testing is a very sapient activity, and it's always about being conscious of what you're doing, why you're doing it, and think about the things that you're not doing.
Last question.
Okay, so a quick question, down here.
I keep getting lost. I'm just like, where am I looking?
Okay, actually, what is your thought process? Do you, when you get a ticket for testing, do you like play the dumb user and then try things that are not supposed to be there?
So yeah, let's say I'm picking up a ticket from Jira. Like my first thing is, let me read and understand these ACs, and let me understand whether there's everything's in this ticket. Hopefully there's already been a refinement. Hopefully we've already discussed whether everything's within the ticket that's needed, etc. Then yeah, the first thing I do is those kind of general checks of the ACs. That's my starting point, to kind of understand what are the ACs, what's expected, what I should be seeing. And then from there, I've kind of become quite instinctive, where I will just start doing things and start investigating, exploring, and depending what type of software it is, like the different ways I can interact with it. You know, there might be some simple things like on mobile, like I might always like try an orientation change, or just little random things that I kind of pick up over time. But yeah, I don't have like a set. I know there's some testers who are very ordered, and so they have set heuristics. There's San Francisco Fire Department is one that James Back uses, and you know, that's a very clear system he has with things he checks and the way he does it. I'm a bit more haphazard because that's just my nature, and it seems to be doing me okay so far, so I just go with it. But yeah, absolutely, I'll use heuristics at times too.
We're running out of time.
Do you take the positive approach to pass the user story, or do you approach with negative scenario that like fail?
I don't think one way or another, because I don't think it's like, I don't think about negative scenarios. I think more about what is happening and trying to explore all the things that could happen. So yeah, it's more about just exploring and functionality that's there and what could be there.
Okay, this is like a really last one.
Don't you think that the testing process should start when the user experience design process starts? There should be like a collaboration or something.
Yeah, but if it can happen even earlier, yeah. In an ideal world, it's happening in that like kind of pitching discovery team. Yeah, exactly. If the client pays is the biggest question.